All right. So one of the things that I just said was about the frame of reference, about being time oriented and event oriented. That these two things work together, and it's the whole way that the Western mind works.
Mm-hmm.
And that in order to learn to get great benefit out of anapanasati, the frame of reference needs to be changed from event oriented into process oriented. And I'll explain to you what that means. And also to change it from in those events and the sequence of events over time to begin to realize that everything that needs to be done right now. And that all the benefits that you're ever going to get from anything are to be gotten right now.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, all of the meditation students, just like you do, are saying, okay, if I do this, that, and the other thing in the sitting meditation, then this, that, and the other thing over there should happen out there, and it ain't happening. Okay. And part of that has to do with basically giving way too much power to the meditation and the sutras and all of that, instead of taking that power for yourself. Not the self that is the no self, but the self in the sense of the strong mind, like a lion. So that would be the third thing is that almost all of the students who ever call and everyone else that's on Reddit and all of that are playing the game of victim.
Mm-hmm.
We start off as victims. We start off as children. We start off as being out of control. They put on our diapers. They tell us when to pee. They make all of these rules for us. They lead us around by the hand. And as we grow up, we expect that same situation to continue throughout our lives. And we will show all kinds of authorities that will promote that so that the whole society winds up a society of victims. Some of the victims are victimizing each other, hoping to get a leg up. Well, to become a Buddha is to become a lion, is to become a winner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This is something that a lot of people don't understand, and so because of that, they practice the teachings of the Buddha all wrongly. They practice the teachings of the Buddha the way they've been practicing everything else in their lives, expecting new results.
Mm-hmm.
Someone said that one time that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting new results is a definition of insanity.
Mm-hmm.
If that's true, then all of Western Buddhism is full of people that suffer from insanity. And in fact, I use the word suffer in the sense of wanting something you don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly why you called, is because you want something that you don't have.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And that's the one of the Buddha's definition. In fact, it's the third in line as the definition of suffering,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it? Definition of suffering is wanting things we don't have.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
other definition after that would be putting up with things that are disagreeable.
Can you repeat that again?
Putting up with things that are unagreeable, disagreeable, hard to maintain, hard to put up with,
Mm-hmm.
hard to endure. So that's the other part of suffering. Putting up with things that are hard to endure and wanting things that we don't have.
Mm-hmm.
Something is here and we don't want it to be here. We want it to be there. And we also want something over there to be here.
Oh.
All right. This is part of the definition of suffering. And so if you're going to come out of suffering, one of the more important things is to come in contact with a way of practice so that you get the results that you want right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you want something and then get it, then that's satisfaction. Wanting something and not getting it is suffering. Is that not true?
Yeah, I'm just wondering because I do notice some progress in my practice. My life has improved a lot, actually. So that would contradict what you just said because I'm doing a practice. It's producing some results.
But now you're telling me something new in the sense that you're actually contradicting yourself.
Well, not completely. It's like
okay,
I'm still
so
not.
things are a mixed bag then. That we can
Yeah,
agree that things are a mixed bag.
yeah.
Right.
No, but what I wanted to ask because you said, yeah, I won't have to look for the results at this very moment. How would this translate into practice?
It translates into practice in many different ways. The first and interesting one is the Zen approach. Zazen, just sitting with the concept. There's no place to go. There's nothing to do. The spring comes and the grass grows by itself. They think of it also in the sense of Zazen is just sitting, means not doing anything else. And that's so hard for young Japanese students, but it's almost impossible for Westerners to do that. Okay. So in a way, what we're talking about is that you, with your knowledge about this, that, and the other stages, to where in Zazen they don't teach the students anything about that. They just go right for the actual goal of just sit there. And if you hear an old Zazen master, he's just going to tell you how pleasant it is just to sit there and do nothing. Quite marvelous. But for the beginner, it's a struggle.
Yeah, for me
Why?
that's also very
Because
hard.
they want things. All right. So sometimes a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And that another way of talking about it would be that if students, regardless of what culture or background or levels of education about Buddhism or anything else, or the philosophical underpinnings, that if the students are practicing correctly according to the teachings of the Buddha, then by practicing correctly, it will be good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
And now you're saying, well, at least now, and we can consider this a beginning, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Okay. So if things are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, and that we attribute that to correct practice, then all of the philosophical underpinnings and backgrounds are not going to be very important if the student is practicing correctly. That in fact, all the theoretical underpinnings and backgrounds and whatnot should in fact go and point directly to the student as to how to practice correctly. Is that not true?
But this good in the middle, let's say I'm somewhere in the middle because I feel somewhere in the middle of the road. That would mean that this good is the same as the good in the end, but this can't be that. I feel like something is changing in my life all the time, and some things are improving, but I feel like everything is going in the right direction.
Okay.
And
that's good. You're going in the
is that
direction of being satisfied, but you're not yet satisfied. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's it. So is that meant with good in the middle?
No, no. What good in the middle means is that you're satisfied.
Okay.
Good means that you like it, that you're satisfied with it, and you're telling me that you're not yet satisfied, that you're just seeing progress.
So would that mean
This is back to that Zen statement that is often made, is that you're already enlightened. Sit down and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get you to reframe back to the here now. Think about everything happens in the here now. And now you're talking about progress rather
Yeah.
than process.
Well, I still don't get it completely.
I know. And it may take you a while.
Yeah.
May take a while. Sometimes it does to change your frame of reference
Yeah.
into realizing that anytime that you're wanting to make progress, even if you're saying, yes, I'm making progress, what that means, if you think about it, is, and I am dissatisfied with where I am now.
Yeah. I mean,
And yet you could be at that same stage making progress, but you're satisfied with it. So the issue is not whether you're making progress or not. The issue is whether you're satisfied with it or not.
the thing is, in my meditation, I feel like I'm doing something like similar like that. What I'm doing is like I'm putting some effort into it, and then I drop the effort, and then I start with the effort again, drop it, and this is kind of a nice feedback loop to me. So it makes the effort easier, and also the letting go kind of gets reinforced. With letting go, I mean just the third part of the satipatthana refrain, where he says, yeah, just sit there for its own sake, basically. So I try something like that, but for me it's not pure, because I still feel like I need some effort. I need to do something, because when I'm
Well, as you probably are aware, noble right effort is one of the factors
yeah,
of the Eightfold Noble Path.
yeah,
So if you're practicing correctly, that means that you're using right effort.
yeah,
And the definition of right effort that I'll give you is just the least amount of effort possible
okay,
to get the job done.
yeah.
And yet you're not really getting the job done yet. So whatever effort you're putting into it is not the right effort.
Yeah, I feel like during a sit, the amount of effort reduces. So it's like in the beginning there's very much effort. It's really feeling like tension in my body, and after, let's say, an hour, I can really drop some of that effort, and it's during the whole sit it's reducing. So
Okay, but if you could remember to reduce the effort, you would. You're saying that the effort is going to be reducing all by itself, and I'm telling you, you cannot be a victim to your right or wrong effort. You've got to be the lion and take control of it. This is a change in attitude, and it has to do with right now. Don't
yeah.
wait for 30 minutes for your effort to improve. Do it right now.
Well, the thing is, if I would start without effort, I feel like I'm just daydreaming. For me, that would be a problem.
If you catch the mind daydreaming, you should come back to the breath and start again. If you know you're daydreaming, if you can see the daydreaming and you're not stopping that daydreaming, then you're not using right effort at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. So in the practice, should I put in some intention at all, or?
Well, so long as you understand that intention is
Mm-hmm.
wanting something. If it materializes immediately, then that's satisfaction. But if it doesn't materialize, then the intention just is just more wanting and more wanting and more wanting. That's suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So the intention should be to do it. Here's an example. If you're sitting in a chair and your intention is to stand up and walk and go someplace, but your intention is not strong enough so that no matter how much internally you struggle, you can't make it to your feet, then that's suffering.
Yeah.
You're driven by the desire to get out of the chair and you can't quite get out of the chair.
Yeah.
So what's the use of the value of intention? There is nothing but suffering based upon wanting to get out of the chair. Now, if you can't get out of the chair, then maybe the best thing to do is to relax and sit in the chair. Who knows? Maybe there'll come an opportunity where you can get out of the chair. And then you might want to get out, because then if you have the intention to get out of the chair, you can get out of the chair and you'll be successful.
Yeah.
All right. So the point that we're making is that there's some things that's missing in your practice. And that's why it's not a complete practice yet. It's not an appropriate practice that gives you good results in the beginning, good results in the end, and good results in the middle.
Well, does it say that all the results are good or some of the results are good?
That's going to be up to you. Let us put it this way. When you're practicing Dhamma, all of the results are good. And when you're not practicing the Dhamma, is at best being a mixed bag.
But can't it be that...
So that means that if it's a mixed bag, then what you're practicing is not necessarily 100% appropriate.
Yeah, that might be a... But
okay, do you recognize that you're spending right now a lot of time with me justifying your practice?
No, I try not to.
Do you actually want to learn something about how to correctly practice, or do you just want to continue to justify that your practice is good enough as it is?
No, that's
because if that's how this talk goes, then you'll never call me back, and you won't get any benefit.
No, what you're saying right now is like, I'm justifying. I know that this is something which I do a lot. that's maybe one of my problems. But yeah, that was
I'm
my
not
next...
quite following you. I don't know what you mean.
No, I'm justifying myself a lot in my daily life. So that's good that you're saying that. So how would I put that things you said into meditation? Does that mean I should meditate more or less?
If you can, please listen.
Yeah.
Okay. It may take a little while. The teachings of the Buddha centers around one thing and one thing only, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha, suffering and the end of suffering. In that regard, this would be called the Buddhadhamma. This is what the Buddha actually teaches, that anapanasati is merely a tool or a method to get the mind fit for work so that it can get put to work for doing the Dhamma, which would be understanding the Eightfold Noble Path, the Four Noble Truths, how it puts together, how it transforms one's life, how we throw out all of the old garbage and we become completely free from doubt about what is suffering and what is not suffering, completely free from doubt about whose responsibility is it anyway. And another aspect is to be completely free from doubt about whether you can, in fact, do this practice correctly. And until then, people are filled with doubt. So you'll justify this and you'll justify that and everything like that. So everything then is based around anapanasati, and the Buddha talks about it is that this method will yield great fruit. Now, there at that time was already a number of practices that were already being done. The Buddha was part of that, and that he was going to one best teacher after another until he figured out, each teacher in turn, whatever they were teaching was not what he was looking for. And so he had done all of the jhana stuff before he did all of the self-flagellation, the austerities, the tudanga, and all of that. And it was after then that he figured out, oh no, none of those things are correct, that there is a path to enlightenment. And that path to enlightenment is actually in the first jhana, and that the Anapanasati Sutta, most specifically, if you know how to read it, will teach students exactly how to get into first jhana and how to gather the jhana factors together so as to make the mind fit to work. And then in the Anapanasati Sutta, it actually tells you exactly what work there is to do and exactly how to do it. But all of this is there in just a few sentences. And so you have to sort of parse it down to figure out what the Buddha was talking about. And that's how you fit all of this in with all of the other sutras. But everything is laid out. In fact, the word Pali means the word thread, like a polynomial, polyunsaturated, poly this and poly that in English language, like polynomial means a string of numbers, okay? So that's what the word poly means. It means string. Well, guess what? So does the word sutta. It also means a thread or a string.
Okay.
So when we say Pali Sutta, we're actually translating it most specifically as thread, which would then be the walk and the woof of how the things are fit together. And so all of the sutras fit together, but almost everything runs in circles around the way to practice is this setting up in the Anapanasati Sutta. And so the Anapanasati Sutta is started like this. First off, there's a huge, huge audience. Many, many teachers are there with many of their students. And the Buddha is talking about them, okay, that some groups are doing this kind of meditation, and those students are doing that kind of meditation, and this group over here is doing this other stuff and attaining these things in jhanas and whatnot like that. And then he points down here and he says, and this is a group of nobles. Some have the Sotapan, some have Anagami, some have an Arahat, some of them have fruit, some of them have path, etc., like that. So it was a huge assembly. And then he said that Anapanasati has great fruit, and one of the great fruits is Iddhyapada, which means the four powers, with the four bases of the powers. And we'll talk about those. In fact, we've already been talking about them. I just didn't tell you what they meant in that context. So with the basis of power, then the practice can be done. But also because the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha says, is practice for the fulfillment of the satipatthana. Now he's pointing at something. And then he says we practice the satipatthana for the fulfillment of the 7 factors of enlightenment. And yet you go over to the Satipatthana Sutta, and it says in that particular place, it mentions the 5 aggregates, and then it mentions the Eightfold Noble Path, and in fact, the 4 Noble Truths. But if you see the way that the Eightfold Noble Path and the 4 Noble Truths folds into the 7 factors of enlightenment, you'll see that they're exactly the same thing. And so as we practice Anapanasati, we begin to understand that this is actually the method of understanding how the mind works and the teachings of Paticcasamuppada or Paticcasamuppada. Have you ever heard that word, dependent origination?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the theoretical way the mind works. It's kind of like the mental map. But the Anapanasati Sutta shows exactly how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet most people cannot connect Sutta number 9, which is the sutta that is called On Right View, where Paticcasamuppada is deeply discussed, with the Anapanasati Sutta, because they don't know how to read it. It's coded. Mm-hmm. It's almost like when you're talking to a particular audience, and that audience has a firm foundation about literature, and then the speaker can speak of this and speak of that. Everybody understands it because they've got it in context. Mm-hmm. That context is missing to the modern sutta reader. We don't have the underpinning context that takes a while to build up from an Asian teacher to understand the context of how the stuff puts together. That's why we can say now that the Anapanasati Sutta is actually teaching how to practice Paticcasamuppada, is because there's a number of key words, and those key words were put together for me by a friend who is really excellent at the Thai language. Mm. He's so good at it that he actually reads the suttas in Thai. And he's pointing out for me in several places, mostly when I ask him to go do this research, of how poor the English language translations are in helping us understand exactly how to do this practice. Okay. So first off, let's put in context part of the Eightfold Noble Path. In fact, we're going to put the whole Eightfold Noble Path right in context with anapanasati, and this is how it's done. First off, we normally practice anapanasati when he says, go to the foot of a tree, go to a hut, go to some secluded place. By going to a seclusion, which the meditators now, they sit on the floor or they go to retreat or whatever like that, and they gain seclusion. One of the qualities of seclusion is that our sila is perfect. Because we're not talking, we do have right speech. Because we're not doing anything at all, we have right action. And because we're not doing anything at all, really, then at this moment, we're in right livelihood. So, in fact, some of the factors of the path are taken care of. The Buddha is really big on this issue of seclusion, of really getting away from the world, because that's actually the ultimate goal, is to get away from society, to get away from the ways that we did things and live a happy, joyful life. And so we need to practice having a happy, joyful life in this here now every time we think of it. And so one of the things that you're going to have to throw out of your own mind is a clock. Why? The clock says I meditate now and then tick, 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 and now I get the results. So that you begin to get when you're doing the practice, you're getting the results right now. So let's see how to do that. First off, we've got 5 pieces left. The 4 pieces that we'll talk about in the sense of right view, right sati, right effort, which we've talked about, and right attitude, then form a base that allows a person to have a right noble mind, a unified mind. In the Pali, this is called Arya Sama Samadhi. And that means a gathering together, or that when the mind is unified in the sense of no doubts, no conflicts of interest, no lies, everything is clean. This is when the mind will become unified. So you can see how a conflict of interest breaks us up. How doubts, maybe this, maybe that. Do I come, do I go, etc. This is all things that keep the mind divided. And so if we're going to get into a state of unity, we need to do that on a, let us say, a frequent basis. First off, to find out what it's like and enjoy it. And number 2, to develop the skills and habits of getting into that state. And this doesn't take long. It takes right effort. So let's start looking at right view. The first thing to say about right view is that normally we start in an ordinary view and it becomes noble over time. And when the right view becomes noble right view, that's when the path itself becomes noble. So the view is the forerunner in all cases. For instance, you're not even going to sit down to practice meditation if you don't see any value in it.
Yeah.
Okay, and a lot of people are like that. They don't meditate because they don't have the right view that it could be of some use, some value. But as you grow in wisdom, as you grow in your noble right view, you'll see more and more and more about what that whole way is, of how to practice. So now that we've got the foundation, you can see that in the fact that if we're going to do anapanasati, then when the mind wanders away from the breath, into dream states, into daydreaming, or wherever it goes, then we're not watching the breath. All right? But our attitude, or let us say our view, is that we, at least because we're determined to practice it right now, that we want it to be on the breath, and it's not. But we don't know it's not because we're daydreaming as we normally do. We're in a normal state. And then something will happen, a wake-up call, sati will happen. We'll remember to take a look at what's going on. Basically, we come to the present moment and recognize, oh, I was going to watch my breath, and here I am daydreaming.
Yeah.
What students normally do is that they start into a, what you would call, they don't start, they continue in the same feeling state that they were in when they were doing the daydreaming. And then they don't like the daydreaming. And so now we're in a state of wanting to get rid of something. And here it is. All right. Why is it still here? It's because we're not practicing right effort. Not yet. Right effort is to come to the conclusion, aha, I can see you. Aha, I caught you. This is a success. It's not a failure. The mind, when it had wandered away from the breath, was just doing what it normally does. It was daydreaming, you're calling it. So I'll use your word daydream.
Yeah.
The mind is daydreaming. That's what it always does. It does that. I mean, it's been doing that most of your life. What's new is the wake up. Oh, I thought I was going to watch my breath, not do the daydreaming.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so this is success. This is when, by the way, to recognize sati, to wake up, is actually in another frame of reference to say experience the mind. In this case, we're experience the mind as being hindered and in daydreaming, as opposed to experience the mind that is solidly settled on the breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So we can see that. We can see that the mind is not where we wanted it to be, due to our right view. So we're also experiencing the mind. Guess what? That's stage 9 of anapanasati. When we say steps and stages, this, do not think about it like armies march, but think about it like a dance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, except instead of being a 2-step or a waltz, this is a 16-stepper.
So it's a circle. It's like going round.
Well, there's going to be this, that, and the other thing in a kind of order, and we kind of do it over and over again in that kind of an order. Yeah. So, in fact, by recognizing, for instance, that you, the mind is Dhammanupassana is also associated with air in the sense of clouds. That everybody understands that thoughts don't exist. Actually, they're like clouds in the air. Mm-hmm. And the clouds have several properties. One is they block sunshine, and the two, if you get caught in the cloud, you can't see anything. And yet thoughts are like clouds marching through the air, like the wind. They're blowing them through. They're always temporary. There's nothing permanent about the thoughts. So we're already, by recognizing that a Nietzsche quality, is that we're seeing step 13 of anapanasati. That the mind is just temporary, is here, there, and the other place. And if we can understand that it in fact is temporary, then that should mean that it should be actually very easy to change the content of the mind. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it really is. Go ahead.
So for these steps, you suggest that I notice certain things about my mind during my meditation. How do I know that I'm not deluded about going to the next step? You said there are steps in the anapanasati probe.
Do not be deluded. Just listen to what I'm saying. The first thing that you have to do, don't jump ahead and stay with me. The first thing that you notice is the mind is either on the breath, is under meditation, is practicing correctly, or the mind is wandered away and is lost in daydreams. Can you tell the difference between a daydream and a not daydream? I thought you could. Yeah, all right. Yeah. So now that you've recognized that the mind has wandered away and not on the daydream, we now have to take the right effort to move us out of that. And so we do that with a kind of a thought of gladdening the mind, step 10 of anapanasati, and gladdening the mind is with the success of knowing that, in fact, sati has occurred, and we do recognize that the mind had wandered away from the breath. Mm-hmm. Success. Yeah. Bingo, we caught you. Got it.
Okay.
All right, now that's the first thing, to start having success immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we got success, we can go back to the breath and start again. Now, I've intentionally left starting again to now to point out that the very, very number one item on the Buddha's list in this regard of steps is the body breathing. Understanding that I'm breathing in long, understanding that I'm breathing out long, and then understanding I'm breathing in short, and I understand breathing out short. Here, long and short means that the long breath is a full breath, taking a lot of oxygen. If you can, it's almost like topping up,
Mm-hmm.
so that the shoulders rise, the chest rise, the diaphragm opens.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And
So,
then we breathe out in a kind of a sigh that is a relief that gives us a stage of joy, satisfaction, that joy that we got from remembering that the mind had wandered away from the breath now settles into a satisfaction. Ah,
mm-hmm.
relief,
Mm-hmm.
pleasure.
Um, so, so you're saying I should try to breathe with the whole body. It's not like here or somewhere there.
No, no. Nose tips is for other work.
Okay.
This is for the work of the Buddha.
Okay, for the satipatthana.
Yes,
Okay.
to
So,
experience the whole body. There
mm-hmm.
is no place in anapanasati where it says experience the nose tip.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There is nowhere anything about anapanasati to talk about nimittas.
Yeah.
Those things, nose tip and nimittas, come from a much later version of Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in the suttas.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I have pictures. It's just maybe some nimitta, or sometimes it's just a picture of my hand, let's say, or a certain body part. And the thing is, I have
Since you're
difficulty.
not developing the nimitta, don't call these things nimittas. They're just images.
Yeah, or images.
All right. The nimitta was from the Kasina meditations, and that the two major kinds of Kasina meditations was a mud pie, which
Mhm,
was often called the red, which is actually just dirty mud color, like the color of dried blood, and that
mhm,
they would make a disc out of it, let it bake in the sun, and then the meditator would stare at this mud disc and then close his eyes and try to repeat it precisely and exactly.
mhm.
Then he would open his eyes again and give it another shot. And after many, many hundreds of hours of doing that, he can gain a fairly good recollection of what that mud pie is like. So that when he opens his eyes and say, yep, that's it.
Do you think that's a good practice or?
No, and neither did the Buddha.
Okay.
No, he quit all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But students who were doing that kind of stuff would come to him already practicing that stuff. And he was the one who recommended to stop doing all of that stuff and bring your meditation object on the inside rather than having an external object.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Uh,
fire meditations now become the mind meditation. That sky meditations like cloud watching and astronomy and all actually then becomes the Dhammanupassana of the contents of the mind. And the
mhm,
water meditations then become the Vedana. So the
mhm,
old meditations that were based upon the physical world are now brought into the satipatthana as the four foundations of mindfulness inside.
mhm. Um, with the elements, there's some part in the Satipatthana Sutta where he says, yeah, to have some elements. What I'm doing is like I'm making Like
Do
I'm
you want to
imagining.
practice the way that I'm talking, or do you want to tell me all about what you're doing?
No, I just want to ask a question if this is in
Okay.
line with how you would propose or not.
Well,
Um,
I'm just getting kind of started with it.
yeah, okay.
Okay, so listen on.
Okay.
All right. So far, we have talked about step 9, step 10, step 13, and we're beginning going back now to step 1 and step 2 of anapanasati. Most importantly, it's important to get enough oxygen. The Buddha was really big on breathing, making it into a meditation, which means taking a deep, long breath. This is step number 1. And that the out breath is going to be a sigh, a big, long out breath. And you can think of it as the in breath is the winning, and the out breath is the satisfaction of the win or the relaxation. Why? Because after you've won something, the job is over and you can bask in your laurels. And so it's that basking place, that out breath that's
Mm-hmm.
relaxing and should, if you are practicing correctly, take you into a deep state of peace. Maybe not the first time you try it, but if you work with it, of going into a nice state of relaxation and peace, it will bring on what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa calls a little nibbana.
Mm-hmm.
Another way of talking about it is that by going into this relaxed state, um, is actually the practice of the third noble truth. Most people never think about or access or talk about the third noble truth. They're just kind of let it be. But
Mm-hmm.
in fact, the right way to practice anapanasati is to develop the third noble truth as
Mm-hmm.
a skill to be developed.
Mm-hmm. I don't understand that at all. Can you
Do you know
reformulate?
the third noble truth?
So that there's a path.
What is
No,
the third noble truth?
no, the third is that there are that there is a origin for my suffering.
Please
Not a,
tell me again. You're breaking up. I didn't hear you. Third noble truth is what?
um, well, maybe I forgot. mm,
Well, what did you say?
uh, that there is a source for my suffering.
No, that's the second noble truth, and
So,
we'll be dwelling on that quite a lot. Who is the source of your suffering?
uh, tanha.
No, you are the source of your suffering. If you actually look at the second noble truth, it is caused by greed, ill will, and delusion. Greed is, in fact, wanting things you don't have.
Yeah.
Ill will is putting up with something that you don't want to put up with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so who creates those things? Who does the wanting? The answer is you. This is the whole point is if you're going to play victim, the victim wants it to be something on the outside. Oh, it's my meditation's fault.
Yeah.
Or maybe the teacher didn't give me the right instructions.
Yeah.
Or maybe just life sucks. All right. So we have to begin to change our attitude. And our attitude to be changed is from the attitude of a loser, or at least at your point of getting a mixed bag, into the attitude of being a winner, to being a lion, to become successful, and to practice being successful. Just like a lion cub is not ready to take down a gazelle, but the lion cub is still a lion, and he roars and he does his thing with that lions do. Okay? So become a lion cub. If you're not ready to be a full grown lion, then at least be a lion cub and start to play with your meditation, knowing that it's going to give you increased skill levels.
Mm-hmm.
And so now your success becomes real. It's not a mixed bag anymore. That in fact, when you don't get the results you want, you can recognize that, oh, that's because at that point in time I just wasn't practicing correctly.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not a matter of the situation. Okay, so we are working now with right view and right sati. Right sati is the most important skill to be developed because you will need to remember things just at the right point of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want it to be available. Maybe not all the time. In fact, it's not going to be there all the time. In fact, in the suttas, the Buddha uses the word that when sati is an enlightenment factor, it is unremitting. That's the key word, unremitting. Like this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Imagine that this is a drum head and that this is a drum mallet.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way that most Westerners think about sati, is to coming and sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the way to play a drum?
No.
Nope. Is that the way to make some noise? Is that the way to get any enjoyment out of this stuff? But how about this? That's sati for you. Why? Because it's unremitting. It keeps coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back, and hopefully it's going to come back just when we need it the most.
Mm-hmm.
Because the mind's going to wander away. The mind's going to be in daydreams. And we need to bring sati to the fore so that we can remember, oh, I don't have to daydream right now. I can be a Buddha. I can be a lion instead right now. Let me take a deep breath. And that's the point when we start practicing the third noble truth, which is the satisfaction in this moment of being free from suffering.
Mm-hmm.
We can experience being free from suffering from time to time as we practice it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a whole part of the thing that I have left out so far intentionally, and the next time you call, we'll go into greater detail about it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and that is the Vedana. So far, we've talked about the body. So far, we've talked about the mind. So far, we've talked about the mind's objects, especially the temporary and the daydreaming, and that we need to put something better in the mind rather than the daydreams. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But we haven't talked about Vedana, not in the sense of anapanasati. But when you begin to understand what the Buddha was actually doing with Vedana, you'll begin to understand, oh, he's only teaching us how to practice the Paticca But the first thing that needs to be done is we need to gather all of the factors of the first jhana together. Do you know the jhana factors? What are the jhana factors?
Piti, Sukha, well, I'm not sure about Vitakka and Vichara. And
you're not sure?
Well, there's some article who say, well, I'm not sure what they mean actually. I know that they're in the description.
Okay, let's go with the standard of applied and sustained thought and leave it at that.
Okay.
You could also think of it in the sense because they're so close in the Indo-European languages that they're actually talking about visualization versus vocalization.
Okay. So there's
or
still
mental
some
images versus audible images.
Yeah. So Lay Bracington says it's just that there's some thought somewhere around still in the first jhana.
Certainly. We want those. We're going to put them to work.
Yeah, but so that, and then the Piti Sukha, well, I have four factors. The fifth, is there a fifth?
You left out the most important one of all. Seclusion from the hindrances.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet that was the first thing that we were working on, is secluded. So once we have the mind secluded from hindrances, and we have the sequence of events that you named as piti and sukha, then you have the mind fit for work so that you can apply it to that which needs to be applied to, and you can keep the mind focused there so as to apply the mind for something that's valuable, useful, and wholesome.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to guard against letting the mind have contents that you're calling daydreams, which will be thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, thoughts of work to do, thoughts of things you want, even enlightenment, thoughts of wanting enlightenment. That sucks. As opposed to actually being enlightened, which is pretty good stuff. All right. So before we go into it any farther, I've got a pop quiz for you. What is piti?
Pity. That's what I imagine is like this ecstatic
It's an
joy.
imagination, huh? Never mind. Go ahead.
No, yeah, it's. I feel like it's this ecstatic joy.
Okay. And are you doing that?
I feel I have some problems with that because I really have to give into it without wanting it. That's for me the hard thing.
Oh, okay. So you want to be enlightened, but you don't
Yeah.
want pity.
No, I want pity. I want pity, but I want it too much.
Well, there's a difference between wanting it and not having it, and wanting it too much and still not having it, and just actually doing it because you're practicing correctly.
Yeah. So how would I do it?
All right. Well, we haven't even defined what it is yet.
Okay.
You got any other ideas? You've only talked about process, and you haven't talked about what it is. No definitions yet.
So it is some joy. It's a good feeling, or it's at least ecstatic. I would say it's really.
At least good enough, huh? All right. So what is sukha then?
Sukha is this feeling of okayness. It's like it just feels relaxed and nice and good.
Okay. So I'll give you 50. I'll give you 50% on this pop quiz.
Okay.
Yeah, failure on 50 and a check mark on sukha, at least close enough. All right. In fact, I've already given you the proper hints. Generally, we'll say that rapture is not a good translation, and we'll talk about it later. But let's go right after what pity means. But unfortunately, I do not know of any English language word that actually works, that gives all of the full definition. But I have a sound to make that will point it out, but I'll use that later after you understand what I'm talking about. But basically, pity is what everyone is actually looking for. Pity is what happens to people who have then religious experiences or meditation experiences. And the Christians, when they have it, they think that they're in the presence of God because they feel good. Or some people who write books on Buddhism will give a point in time that they became an arahat simply because they had a particular feeling in meditation. But the important thing is, number one, that it is a feeling, and number two, people like it and want it, and number three, they're out there looking for it in all the wrong places, so that they, number four, figure out that it's something that's supposed to happen to you rather than something that you actually manufacture.
So the correct interpretation is that it's a manufacture.
It is to be manufactured.
Okay.
And we've already got the key ingredient for it. All right. Now, where does the normal world go for their highs?
Drugs, experiences, things to do, like meeting with friends or with.
How about, yeah, but meeting with friends does not give people the kind of highs that they're looking for, and they know it. How about running a 100-yard dash and winning the Olympics?
Yeah, that sounds like it.
Okay, all right. if you'll notice, if you've seen these races, that if the guy is far enough out in the head so that he knows that he's going to win right before he finishes the race, right as he's crossing the finish line, his entire posture changes. It changes from running, into his arms are in the air, his chest is out, because that's what's going to hit the ribbon. And not only that, but his steps are changing now from running steps into stopping steps. Because he's won.
Yeah.
He's done it. All right. That's the quality we're looking for, is the quality of 100%. I've got it. And we need to do that with our meditation also, to become a real lion, a real champion. And one of the ways of thinking about that is that when you're practicing the Dhamma of the Buddha's method takes one to the highest peak that humanity has to offer. That would be the samadhi. We can call it noble. We can call it one who is free from conflicts of interest. We think of it as a statesman. We think of someone like that that's noble or regal, in the sense that while he may throw a carcass into the mud, he will not get into the mud to wrestle someone else for that carcass.
Mm-hmm.
All right? That he's going to stay lily white, pure, does not get his hands dirty, does not work. He's above that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, in fact, one of the, you could think of it in the sense, in the old deep South, it would have been the plantation owner who would have been the most noble, the most regal, the top of humanity. Never mind that his humanity ran slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What we're talking about is a quality, and think about it like this. What is the very best that humanity has to offer? We can think of people like the Buddha, like Socrates.
Mm-hmm.
We generally don't think of popes like that, because we can find that the popes were not always rising to the top of humanity. But a few monks did, St. Francis of Assisi and a few of them. But there have been times and places in humanity where a human being does rise to a very high quality. This is what we mean by the word Aryan, and the Buddha recognizes, yeah, I stole the word, because we're taking it away from heredity, just like the word noble. It used to mean aristocracy or nobly born or whatever like that, regal.
Mm-hmm.
And we're changing the definition of it to be something that a human being can do, in the sense of being born again into a different lineage, into a new lineage. And this one is the attainment of very, very high quality mind. And the most important quality of one who has this kind of mind is one who is absolutely successful. He is absolutely satisfied with the way things are. He has done the work that needs to be done, and now he's sitting and enjoying the fruit of the labor.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, I'm actually quoting sutras out of the out of the Buddhadhamma right now. Done the job that needed to be done. All right. Now we think of that from Westerner positions or ideas, that after I meditate for many, many years, and I'll finally get to the point of having the job finished and there's no more work to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But I'm saying, no, the way to practice that is to do it in the here now every time. Get yourself in that state of high quality as best you can to become that winner. Now, as I said, this quality that we're looking for of rapture does not have very many English language words associated with it, but it does have an awful lot of people who are trying to get that out of life. And the kind of language they use would be the thrill of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Another one would be the ecstasy and the agony. in the sense that the agony is losing and the ecstasy is the win. Or getting shot down in flames is the agony, or not only just losing, but we crash. That's a real lose.
Yeah.
Break a leg or bust up our skis, or if we're in a Formula One race, we just destroyed $1 million car. So that's the whole high point, low point. And that people visit the low points far more often than they visit the high points. Now, the next thing that's kind of interesting is that in the Anapanasati Sutta, all of the 16 points of it, the first two of breathing, the long, deep in-breath, the successful breath, and its out-breath, the verb that's in the sutta is the verb to understand. Only in the sense that everybody already knows how to do it. There's no training to be done. It's just a matter of doing it. Everybody knows to take a long, deep breath. They know how to take a long, deep breath. They don't need training. That even when you're playing a woodwind or a brass instrument in the band, learning how to breathe is just part of the course. But I don't think that anybody in any musical school ever gave people in lessons on how to breathe. It's just something that we can do. All of the other 14 stages of Anapanasati, the verb is to train. And this is an important point. So we have to train to gladden the mind. We have to train sati to wake up. That's step 9. We have to train to gladden the mind in the sense of taking on right effort. We have to train the mind to become successful, a winner, the rapture, the high points that settle then into the sukha of satisfaction, which also is a training, but the sukha training is different than the piti training, because the piti training is a momentary high to where the sukha that's there is the place where we maintain it. But now, if you think about it like this, we have now put the jhana factors together in the sense that we are free from the hindrance. We've taken our hit. Remember that the rapture and pleasure is born of seclusion from the hindrances. So when we catch the hindrances, that's when we get that very high. I can be free from that stuff. I am successful. I can do the practice of the Buddha. I can be free from suffering. I can be the top part of humanity. I no longer have to be the victim. I can be a lion. And roar. That's the pity.
I think I finally get it. It's like you look at if there are the hindrances, and when they're not there, you feel the success of that.
Yes. And from that, the sukha becomes the satisfaction. So the rapture is like the success, the win, the I got it. And then the sutta is the aftermath of that, of having a job well done, completed, nothing to go, nothing to do. And we're always talking about that in the here, now, present. This is a little sequence of events that we go on, and we do this over and over and over and over again until it becomes a little tune that we play, and then we get really good at it. All right, so now that we've got the mind in a state of sukha, now it's fit for work. Now we're going to put it to work. Now the mind is fit for work. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about it like that. And once the mind is in that first jhana, and we know it's in first jhana because we just gathered the jhana factors together, and if we can stay in that state, and now the position is, I'm not going to let either the mind with thoughts or the mind with feelings do anything that's going to take me out of this state. I'm going to be on guard. Okay, so that's what we're sustaining. What are we sustaining? We're sustaining the guarding to make sure that the mind remains wholesome,
Mm-hmm.
and not allow any unwholesome daydreaming in. We're only going to let wholesome things in.
Mm-hmm.
We're also going to be on high alert for things, and this is a little bit secondary in the sense that as you gain skill at it, you'll be not only watching thoughts to make sure all your thoughts are wholesome, but you'll also start watching for feelings such as anxiety, tension, not liking, unwholesome feelings of dissatisfaction, fear, anger, any of those kind of feelings that can come up. We can be on guard for those to say, out you go, because I want to maintain my sense of pleasure. This sukha, this resting point of the first jhana becomes the hallmark so that I can, or the resting pad rather,
Mm-hmm.
that this is the place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you go into the higher jhanas, for instance, then you're closing off the thoughts, then later you're closing off the feelings. But that's because of a momentary jhana strength that the mind has, and that when the mind comes back out of those jhanas, those things are going to come back and reoccur.
Mm-hmm.
And the Buddha knew that. That's why he recognized that deeper jhanas is not the issue. The real issue is that first jhana, because that's where we can make the changes needed.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying the other jhanas, they just happen then afterwards?
They will happen. They are
Okay.
natural occurrences.
But
There will be times, if you know what the jhana factors are for all four jhanas, you'll catch yourself in those jhanas from time to time. No big deal. And
mm-hmm.
yet the Western mind is all about, oh, that's the success I want. I want four jhana, etc., like that. That must be really hard to do and high stuff and all of that. Oh no, it's just natural. You'll fall into those states. The
Okay.
real issue is, can you keep the mind fit for work so that you could keep only wholesome thoughts and wholesome feelings,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can investigate the things that are worthy investigation and pay attention to the things that are worthy of attention.
Mm-hmm. Um, as regards to the anapanasati sequence, does this piti, is it supposed to happen at a certain stage, which you described?
Yes, every minute.
Every minute, okay. So it's a different kind of progression with the jhanas than with the anapanasati. Uh,
No, jhana, no, anapanasati is precisely laying out the method of how to use the breath to get into first jhana.
okay. So that's the end of all the steps to get into first jhana.
Let us say once the mind is fit for work, now the work begins.
Yeah. But then I'm not doing anapanasati at
Yes,
all.
you are.
Okay.
Everything has to do with anapanasati, but can you do this part of it first? Because, in fact, the really deep work is going to make sure that only wholesome thoughts are in the mind. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, I bet you can't do that.
Yeah.
So let's go one step at a time. Now, we know what unwholesome thoughts are. The kind of wholesome thoughts that you would have would be the kind of thoughts that are investigating the here now. Like, is this in fact third noble truth level stuff? Yeah, it really is. I like it. No suffering here. Okay, that's the kind of way of looking at it. Because if you thoroughly investigate the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, while you're in this jhana state that you have built on and are capable of maintaining through anapanasati, you're also getting the mind fit for work to do the investigation is needed. Now, I've actually left out something, and that is that I haven't given you the actual definitions of the Pali words. And when you recognize the actual definitions of the Pali words, that we've talked about step 5 and 6, piti and sukha. Step 7 is to see, investigate, understand, or from that step 6 of sukha, to start looking at mental sankhara. Now Sita's sankhara has uh, it has varied definitions of it depending upon your frame of reference. But in the English, they always translate it as the secondary or the less useful way of looking at it. But the first thing that we can look at is to understand that the mental conditioners happen in the moment in the following way. That in formal debate systems, they have a rule about ad hominem attacks. Why? Because if I can get my opponent angry, he will be putting all of his mental power into protecting himself, and he'll stop thinking straight. In short, if I can attack him, he will go into reptilian mode. He will go back into primal ways, and he'll stop thinking, and he'll wind up losing because he's not thinking straight. Mm-hmm. One of the ways is by laughing at people. People who are getting laughed at, they think they're doing a really good job, and all of a sudden his opponent over there is like that. The guy will just lose it. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of behavior is not allowed in debates. Okay, so this is the point then that I'm making is in the present moment, if you can get somebody off their game by getting them into ego or getting them into, let us call it, preservation mode, then you can defeat them easily. This happens, in fact, the silliest place that you can see it is in things like WWE, the wrestling, with all of the false bravado and all of the hatred and everything like that. The original intention was is that if you can get your opponent off guard before the fight begins, then you're more than likely going to be able to dominate him and win. But in worldwide wrestling, unfortunately, it's a rigged game, and everybody already knows. Then, in fact, the insults are mapped out in advance. But the point here, you can see it, of how our feelings then interrupt our thought process. And so sometimes the feelings interrupt that thought process in a big way, and sometimes they're very, very subtle. And sometimes the subtleness is not based upon feeling, it's just based upon habit patterns of the mind. That, in other words, the thoughts do their thing simply because that's the habit they're in, and occasionally they get punctuated by feelings, and then it goes even faster. Yeah. And it's your job to start watching that from this vantage point of absolute security. Mm-hmm. So, in fact, remember that I was telling you about the idiopata, the powers. All right, we've been talking about those. Here's one of them: success. Success is a power. Security is a power. Safety is a power. Satisfaction, a power. And then the top of the list is wealth. Wealth. Uh-huh. The feeling of overflowing with everything you need. You're completely satisfied. You're wealthy, in fact. Mm-hmm. Now, this feeling of wealth has very little to do with money, because when we use the word wealthy in the sense of money, you're actually looking at someone who's generally insecure. No matter how much money he's got, it's not enough. Yeah. He wants more. Yeah. That whatever successes he got out of his money is lost now, and he wants new successes. Mm-hmm. And so this feeling of wealth then is a mental attitude that comes from and in fact, this is the actual outcome then of pity, because of success builds up just like a bucket, that if you turn the water tap on, that bucket's going to fill and overflow. Yeah. And the same thing happens with the Dhamma. Once you keep putting more and more Dhamma in, eventually you're going to overflow. And now Dhamma is just all over the place. Your whole life is Dhamma. And so this is wealth, is when all of the good stuff just overflows. The same thing is with joy. To have enough joy so that you can spread it around with the shovel. Mm-hmm. Not a teaspoon of joy. Oh no, we're going to shovel it out, even with a steam shovel. You know, big machines that just spread joy everywhere.
Mm.
Because your whole society is out there using them steam shovels to show to sow misery and unhappiness and fear, and the politicians want you to vote for them so that they make you unsettled and unhappy,
Yeah.
and the whole society is unhappy, and that everything about work generally is unhappy. So you've got a real task on your hands, and all of that can now be laid at the doorstep of one's right effort. One's right effort is to become a winner immediately,
Yeah.
and then to let that sweep into a beautiful high that comes down to a place that is really easy, a high perch where you can really take a look at what's going on and maintain that first jhana by making sure that nothing comes into the mind that will take you away from the breath.
Do I have to look at these five powers in this state, or is it just something which happens and I don't have to care about?
You should look at them. You should investigate them with the idea, do I have that? Do I have investigation? Do I have sati?
Mm-hmm.
That's the investigation to be made. Do I feel wealthy right now?
Yeah. Is there a sequence to it, or do I have to look at them in a certain order, or is it, or doesn't it matter?
Well, we started with step 9 and then step 13 and then step 10, and then we go down to step 1 and 2, and or actually step 1, and while we're doing that, we're doing step 6 and 7, and then we start doing step 8, and this is all laid out in the Anapanasati Sutta,
Yeah.
but very few people understand the sequence of how it actually operates.
Yeah.
All right, but you can see how that logical is. First thing you do is you wake up. Oh, I'm not watching the breath. I can see that. I can see. Okay, and so we take that deep breath and we feel really good. And
Yeah.
now we're saying, all right, no more. You're not coming back. Daydream, you stay out.
But it comes back, and then I'm doing it again.
And then you do it again. And you become successful all over again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I will try to incorporate that into my practice, and um, well, I think time is well,
Okay, yes, it's about an hour and 20, but that's
yeah,
all right.
yeah.
So
Can I?
long as we're coming to a conclusion together, that you're
Yeah,
feeling comfortable that there is a process that you can do that is going to gain some value for you every time you do it. Good in
yeah,
the beginning, good in the middle.
yeah. What I really liked was this picture of a lion which you gave me, and this really, I think the description of what piti actually is. I've never heard it in such a lucid way, and how to get there is also, well, I have to try it. It's
All right. Yes,
uh,
it is a skill to be developed.
but in some occasions I already had it, so I know what to look for. Um, and yeah, for me that's a
And
good
when you
conclusion.
and
Also,
when you catch it, you just throw it right up in the air.
yeah, yeah. Um, you said that you record this. Can I also have a copy of that record?
Sure. After 5 minutes or so, after the call is finished, it will have an icon there for you to click on. There's 3 bars on the top right hand corner. You just
Yeah,
click on that.
yeah. Because for me it was very dense, so I have to rewatch it and take some notes. And
I actually like that. Please do
yeah,
watch it several times.
yeah. Would you recommend that I also look up the things you said in the suttas and in
Sure,
books?
absolutely, because I want you to understand what we're practicing and what we're talking about, literally beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah. So would you you would recommend Buddhadasa's work, no? Anapanasati Sutta? Uh,
Let us put it this way. So far, on the topic of actually anapanasati, there have been 4 books published.
yeah.
And the best one is still in Thai and has not been published in English yet. but some of it has been, but the translation is not very good.
Okay.
All right, the others I don't recommend.
Mm-hmm.
But if there is one, if you can get a hold of it, this one is the one that I do not recommend.
Mm-hmm.
This is the book that I would recommend that is available now.
Mm-hmm.
Anapanasati Bhavana by
Okay.
Bhikkhu Buddhadhamma, to where this one is mindfulness with breathing. And the author here is Santikara. As you can see, there's a difference.
Okay.
So if you can get this one is the first one I would recommend.
How is it called? It's it's
Anapanasati Bhavana.
a
The word
handbook.
bhavana means training.
Yeah.
That's the word that is in the Pali, that one trains the mind into gladness. One trains the body into piti, into rapture.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be the book you recommend. Do you recommend other authors also?
No. I only recommend Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and suttas.
Yeah.
And
Because
any old sutta that you drag up and ask me questions about, I'm willing to discuss.
yeah. Okay, so I should read some suttas. Do you recommend particular translators? I was like Tanisaro. I don't like Bhikkhu Bodhi very much, but maybe that's just my taste.
I'm not sure that it's appropriate for me to call Bhikkhu Bodhi an eternalist, so I'll just call him a rebirther.
Okay, and you're that's something bad you would say.
Well, let's put it this way. If the Buddha wants us to be in the here now and to stay out of the past,
Yeah.
even the past yesterday and the past time of our childhood, doesn't it make pretty good sense to stay out of the deep, dark past also?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's why
I
I
rest my case.
yeah. So
As well as that it's magical thinking, and that if a student engages in magical thinking, then he'll begin to have the idea that at least some of his responsibility belongs to old past karma,
mhm,
which means that he will never, in fact, be able to practice the teachings of the Buddha, because the Buddha requires us, in fact, to take full responsibility to fix the problem. We cannot leave it in the past,
yeah.
hoping that the past is going to fix it for us.
Hmm. Okay, so you don't recommend him. Um,
Well, um,
what I
there's
like.
something, let us say this, there is something elegant about Bhikkhu Nanamali's translation
Hmm.
of the Majjhima Nikaya.
Hmm.
But the introductions and the footnotes and a lot of the stuff is translated and, let us say, edited by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And
Hmm.
therefore, I would not recommend that you spend too much intention with the footnotes, or the endnotes rather, nor would I bother to read the introduction.
Hmm.
But just stay with the suttas. But the suttas themselves are quite beautiful in the
Hmm.
language that Bhikkhu Nanamali used.
Hmm.
And he was the actual author of that. Bhikkhu
Yeah.
Bodhi really was the editor.
Yeah. I also have access to German because that's my natural language. And there is a very good translation. Or would you just recommend I stick with English?
That's an interesting question. It doesn't actually matter, because I would suggest that every translation so far into a modern language is problematic
Hmm.
because the translations themselves were not done by nobles, they were done by ordinary people. That in fact it's true to say that even, let us say, deep level physics works, like the kind of stuff that needs to be put into journals and peer reviewed and that kind of thing, that the translator needs to know, most specifically, very excellently, the language he's coming out of, but that the language he's translating into should be his own native
Hmm.
language. And number three, and most importantly, he's got to be a physicist. He cannot just be some street bumpkin off of the streets of Germany trying to translate these physics documents into German, or because he
Well,
happens to know German. That's not enough.
it's not like that. It's like a student of Ayakema, and well, the Ayakema tradition, they have some
I
narrative.
do not trust anyone nowadays. I don't
Okay,
know of anyone that I would thoroughly trust that they can do a good English
okay.
translation.
So do I have to learn Pali then?
Yes, and using translations as a guide to the Pali
Okay.
is a good idea. But
Yeah.
going back to the Pali is really the excellent thing to do. And there is one website called Sutta Central
Yeah.
that allows you to have a line by line English language translation with the Pali. Now, I think, in fact, the English language translation is actually a machine translation because they've gotten, it's like all of a sudden they just all just magically disappeared or magically appeared with this one bhikkhu's name on them. But I think that he did it not
Hmm.
meticulously line by line, but rather it was done with the aid of machine like Google or
Yeah.
something like that. So it's okay to use. This is what I do. I use that English language translations by Sabuto and Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations, and sometimes Shinichiro's translations
Yeah.
together with the Pali.
Yeah.
But then I look up the Pali dictionary to make sure that, because there you wouldn't believe some of the stuff that we could talk about later, where it looks like that they're saying one thing, but in fact it's saying quite the opposite.
Hmm.
Here's an example of that, and then we'll go. There is a quote that is very famous. It's known all over the place. The monks have this chanting. It goes something like, Itipiso Bhagava Araha Sama Sambuto Licha Charana Sampato Lo Gavidu Anutaro, etc., like that. And yet the sutras where this thing appears in several places, an example of it is in the sutta number 12 in the lion's roar, when the sentence above that says, "How can that man, when he knows the Dhamma, believe the following?" Think about that. What that did was is that sutta actually, that thing that everybody is famous for, or that the Buddha is famous for and is printed everywhere, the Buddha actually disavows it. He says, "This is not what I teach. The teachings that I give do not put me in that place."
Uh-huh.
Now, one of the words that I did use, I got as far as lo gavidu, which means the knower of the world. And yet, when you see the magical version of that, that means that the Buddha even knows each individual fish. And that's not what that means. What it means is he knows the dangers of the world. And he expects you to know that danger also, that you should also be knower of the world so that you can know enough about it to stay away from it. In fact, my favorite quote, and I'll tell you about it later, oh, boundless joy to find at last there is no happiness in the world. That's actually what that logavidu means. The
Yeah.
knower of the world is the one who recognizes that thing's hot. Do not try to get something nice out of it because it ain't there. If you want something nice, it's going to be in here.
Okay.
So there is a lot of problems with the sutras simply because people have a lot of expectations about what's there, and they're the ones who did all the translations. In fact, way back in the old days, back to the 1880s, where you had Riles Davies, I.B. Honer, and that group. These guys were language scholars from Oxford
Mm-hmm.
who were Christians. And they didn't know anything about what they were translating. That's what we've come up with, the Polytext Society, the very first translations into English, completely wrong. There's nothing about it that's useful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That you have to kind of understand. And I, to be honest with you, practiced wrongly for a long time, just like all the Westerners do,
Yeah.
wanting something out of the meditation rather than having it right now. That's a major change in our ways of thinking.
Yeah. So would that be a good perspective how to read the sutras? With
Yes, read for anything that looks magical, see it as magical, rather than thinking that it must be true because it's in the sutras.
mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of magic in there, and some of the magic is brought in by the translators. Some of it was planted like time bombs by later uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, people working with the sutras.
Mm-hmm. Is there some nikayas which are more prone to that?
Yes, absolutely. The most ancient literature of all is the most pure. That would be the Sutta Nipata and the Udana, the Taragita, the Taragatha. This stuff is really known to be very, very old. The second thing was the Majjhima Nikaya was done as a work and assigned to three groups, each one of them divided into five clans, and each of those clans learned 10 sutras, and that this was all put together with the first council upon the death of the Buddha. So the Majjhima Nikaya and the others that I just mentioned are the most reliable.
Mm-hmm.
The Digha Nikaya, it appears, came along about the time of Ashoka, and that the Samyutta and the Anguttara Nikayas are a mixed bag. They were collected over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. So I should
But
start
if you
with.
were going to choose between, say, the Samyutta Nikaya and all of the stuff, you see, there's a lot of stuff there collected about Sotapan, but none of it is of real value other than historically and looking how things are put together. But if you really want to know about what the path to Sotapan are, there's 3 or 4 sutras in the Majjhima Nikaya that are put together that show that path.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
that path is very, very well laid out, and that we've already been talking about it today.
yeah.
Starting with the anapanasati and going into satipatthana, which will take us down to the 5 aggregates and eventually down to paticca samuppada, as well as we're already practicing the Eightfold Noble Path right from the very get-go. But once we get the mind fit for work, that's when we're really going to start doing the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths to the point, especially the Four Noble Truths. That second Noble Truth is actually paticca samuppada. So by delving into this teaching of the Buddha, 3 things happen to a student. One is that they come out of the past in the sense of who was I or what will I be in the future, and start living more in the present moment. The second thing is that we recognize that we have been lied to. Everything that I was ever told about how to be happy was a lie. It was a bait and switch. Somebody says you do this and you'll be happy, and it never happened. And so we give up that lie. In the Pali, the word is silabata paramasa. And then the third one is to give up doubt, doubt about the past. And that doubt comes in 2 versions. One is, whose fault is it anyway? I'm a victim here. It must be somebody else's fault that I'm suffering. And when we get over that, we recognize, oh no, I'm responsible for my own. This is my thing. I suffer because of what I'm doing. And if I stop doing that, I'll stop suffering. Let me practice to see what it's like to be free from suffering right now. Ha ha. Yeah, that's really good. And so this is the way we begin to practice. And so the outcome then is we have the knowledge and vision of what is the path and what is not the path. What is not the path is all the lies you've been told, and what is the path is the Eightfold Noble Path that we've already been practicing, but now we've got it to the point that we've got it. This is it. This is when Shraddha comes in. You know the word Shraddha? Often translated as faith. But what we're using it as is confidence. Confidence based upon success and built on success. So as we're practicing success and gaining success, our confidence about future success increases mightily. And so that's what gives us knowledge and vision of what is and what is not the path. This is basically now what I've taken you to, with leaving a lot of details out, is basically the point between the path of Sotapan and the fruit of Sotapan. This is the tipping point. We're on the path of Sotapan because we're actually practicing the Eightfold Noble Path, but now we're beginning to gain the fruit of it because we know we can do it.
No.
And that becomes part of the fruit,
Mm-hmm.
the success of the path, and the joy that it brings.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, thanks you a lot. I think we have defined what is the things I will do. I'm gonna call you when I have a question and I have read a sutta. And
I was going to ask you that about practice. How much, you said you were actually doing already a couple hours a day or so?
yeah, so I'm doing 2 hours at least per day meditation.
All right. Start practicing in this new way that has success as its basis for your
Mm-hmm.
uh, for your satisfaction,
Yeah.
and learn to cultivate that success and that satisfaction. All right. So let's say maybe about a week or so you could call,
Yeah.
and we'll start in a little bit more.
Yeah.
All right. All right, Christian. We'll see you later then.
Yeah.